Okay, we're going to start section 11.3, which is about exponential functions. If you recall that 4 squared equals 16, 4 to the negative 2 is 1 over 4 squared, which is 1 over 16. 4 to the 0 is 1. So we've done positive, negative, and 0 exponent. Now if we want to do fractional exponents, 4 to the 1 half, if we put that into our calculators, let me grab mine. So you can see that 4 to the power 1 half is 2. So this suggests that square root of 4, so 4 to the 1 half is square root of 4 is 2. Now let's try if that's something we could rely on. Let's try 8 to the 1/3. Well, if we do that on our calculators, that's also a 2. This suggests that 8 to the 1/3 is cube root of 8, which is 2. So in general, as a general rule, a to the 1 over n is the nth root of a to the first power. Okay. So now, if we do say 4 to the 3 halves, we know this is square root of 4 cubed, which is 2 cubed, which is 8, because again the bottom is the index, the top is the exponent. And if you do 4 to the negative 3 halves, it's 1 over 4 to 3 halves, which is 1 over 8. So what about irrational exponents? Well, let's try, for instance, 4 to the square root of 3. The only way we can do this at this point is to put it in our calculators. So 4 to the power square root of 3, and it's an irrational number, and you can see that the answer is a non-repeating, non-terminating decimal. So we're just gonna bring down 4 decimal places, and the question on the test, if we have something like this, it will tell you how many decimal places you should attach to that. Okay, so now based on this, we can define what we mean by exponential functions. Any function that can be written as f of x equals b to the x, where you can see the exponent is in the variable. Okay. And another thing, the students need a media player to open that file. You can't just click on it. If you click on it, it will tell you it's not going to open. So you have to open it with a media player. Did you notice that?
In your computer?
Well, yes. Yeah, so they need a media player.
Yes.
Okay.
That's what I put them in YouTube. So
Yeah, you save it on YouTube. So when you save it on the desktop, then you open your YouTube account and you open it with a YouTube and then you save it there.
you upload it.
Upload it in YouTube.
Yes.
Okay, I'll try that.
So I just wanted to tell you the thing about crashing because it happened to me and it freaking sucks. And
Okay.
then your
Yeah,
See?
actually I did a test first to make sure it works. What's
Oh,
wrong?
no, because there are some projectors that have a microphone symbol here,
Yeah.
and then you don't even need that, but you do.
This
That's
doesn't
what I
have
was
it.
checking.
That's why. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
I asked, and they said they don't. This one is the older version.
Yeah. So,
it's okay.
but
Yeah, I don't. I mean, I obviously I did. I don't know why I didn't have.
yeah,
time
because then
yesterday.
you don't want to be
No,
cleaning it
that's
all
why.
the
That's
time.
part of why I didn't want to put it in the office. But I see your point.
Yeah,
We don't
but
want to go
it's
back.
just to share.
That's
Yeah,
fine.
no
That's
problem.
fine, and you're fine.
But the thing about the long thing, believe me, because yesterday I wanted to burn the building when I saw that the 50 minutes were.
That's why I did the test first. But I'm gonna do one section at a time. I was
Yeah.
wondering how I should do it. No.
Yeah, because if it crashes, something happens, you're going to be so angry.
Yeah. So we're recording now. That's right.
Sorry.
It's okay. Thank you. Sorry for the interruption. Okay. It's called an exponential function to the base b. So you notice that the variable now is in the exponent. It's no longer in the base. So when that happens, we have an exponential function. The base, it has to be any real number, but it has to be greater than 0 and not 1. So you can't have negative in the base, you can't have 0 in the base, you cannot have 1 in the base. And let's see why not. Okay? So if the base is 0, then you have f of x equals 0 to the x, which is 0 as long as x is not 0, and you end up with the x-axis, y equals 0. There's nothing exponential about the x-axis. Okay? If you have a base of 1, f of x is 1 to any power, which is 1. Again, there is nothing exponential about the line y equals 1. It's just a horizontal line. And if the base is negative, say, just pick a negative number, just say negative 1, then the function would be negative 1 to the x. So for instance, if you're doing f of 1/2, you get negative 1 to the 1/2 square root of negative 1. So you get an imaginary number. No place for imaginary numbers when we're doing graphing. So that's why we exclude negative base, 0 base, and 1 base from exponential functions. Now we're going to talk about two basic graphs of exponential functions. Two basic graphs of exponential functions. And that's what the handout is for, so I don't have to graph that. You can see what I'm talking about. I'll just show you a t-chart. But let's see those basic graphs. You know what? Let's look at examples. It's better. Then we'll look at the basic graphs. Okay. So if the first case scenario, if the base is greater than 1, say we'll just pick the easiest number greater than 1, which is say 2. So f of x would be 2 to the x. To graph anything, we make a t-chart. We pick couple of negative values as we always do, and couple of positives, and of course 0. We always want to include 0 in there. So 2 to the negative 2 is 1 over 4. 2 to the negative 1 is 1/2. 2 to the 0 is 1. 2 to the 1 is 2. And 2 squared is 4. And if you do that, if you graph it, you get negative 2, a quarter, negative 1, 1/2, 0, 1, 1, 2, and then 2, 4. And you can see the pattern. It's an exponential growth function. It's an example of exponential growth. It's going up as you look at it from left to right. It has a y-intercept at 1. It goes along the negative x-axis, which means the negative x-axis is a horizontal asymptote. And it doesn't have any x-intercepts. And that's a case of the base greater than 1. Now if the base is between 0 and 1, so we'll just pick a number, say 1/2, and we graph f of x equals 1/2 to the x, which is the same thing as 2 to the negative x. So if you see a base of 2 but you have negative x, you know the base is not going to be 2, it's 1/2. Okay, so just make sure you know that.